Hey everyone. Well, it's been quite a while since my last video, and I apologize for that, but things have just been super busy here. I've had lots going on in my personal life, getting the boat ready, and work has been crazy busy. What you are going to see in this video is the replacement of my hot water tank. And you may remember that in, I think it was my last video, I had a leak issue with the relief valve. So my neighbor John, who's a plumber, came over and he replaced the relief valve. Well, that worked for about 2 weeks and I was having no issues, but I think the poor old tank was just so old and tired that now that it couldn't release that hot water and pressure from the relief valve, what happened was the tank gave out, and I now had water around the base of my tank. So for sure it was coming from the relief valve before because I traced it right to it, but now I was having water around the base of my tank, so clearly the tank was finished. So it was time to just replace the tank and make sure that that system was running properly. My neighbor John was again nice enough to offer his help with this project, since he's a plumber by trade, as I've already mentioned. And he was going to remove the old tank for me, explain things to myself and to you guys as we do that, and then put the new tank in. So here's the new hot water tank on my boat. Not installed, obviously. And John, who's going to help me, is my neighbor. And he lives on this nice Beneteau right next to me. The tank that I have in the boat right now is 6 gallons. So I decided to stay with a 6-gallon tank. And I chose the 1700 series marine water heater. It's by Raritan, I think that's how you pronounce it, and apparently it's the most dependable name on the water. So John just got here and he's going to help me out with the hot water replacement. And here's John, he's my neighbor.
Hello.
Alright John, so now that we're ready to start the project, what would be the game plan for this?
Well, first we're going to want to disconnect the power. Once that's off, we can start draining it.
And that's just going to be a gravity feed?
Yeah. So open that up. You can actually manually open the relief valve here.
Okay.
Popping that open. You can hear it gurgling now.
Okay.
So that's going to allow air to travel into the top side of the tank and help it drain out.
Okay.
Through the bottom valve. Once it's finished draining, we can start undoing all the connections. We'll pull the tank out, prep the new one, and we'll get it set in there.
Well, the way John explains it, it sounds like it should be pretty straightforward. And I should mention that the tank that I had in the boat already has 2 ways to heat it. You can heat it with shore power using your AC, so it's an electrical element. And it can also be heated by the engine by having coolant run from the engine through a hose into the tank, which has a coil, a sealed coil inside the tank, and it loops down, and then it exits out the tank. So that's the hot coolant that will run through there, and then that heats the tank. So right now you're disconnecting the power from it?
Yeah. So we'll just go behind the access panel here. We can undo the connection and we'll be able to pull the wire out.
So when you do a water tank installation for work, does that normally include the electrical hookup as well?
Yeah. So in a house, it's either going to be gas or electric. So whichever it is, we make all the connections.
Okay, so basically when you leave, the tank's good to go?
Yeah.
So what are we going to do next?
We're going to undo these 2 hoses here.
And what are those hoses?
So this is the coolant loop for the engine.
Okay.
So when that engine's running, you're getting that heated water through a coil in the tank, and that's what's going to heat it when you're underway. So
okay.
This is a 6-gallon tank. It's got an electric heating element in it also. so that'll just run off your shore power when you're at the dock.
Okay, and then that heating element you said?
Yep.
That's the heat exchanger,
Yeah,
they call it?
Heat exchanger in the tank. So when we take these hoses off, what we're actually going to get coming out of here is your coolant mixture for your engine. So we'll probably put a dish under here. We'll catch all that stuff before it drains down into the bilge.
Okay.
And we'll just lift the hoses up right away and just keep as much
Okay.
fluid in the hoses as we can.
So I should check my coolant level after we're
Yeah.
done here
Yeah.
and top it up.
Yeah, exactly.
It amazes me the type of grip those things have, hey? Onto the... Well, that's just coming out of the little coil inside?
Yeah, that's draining the coil.
Okay, well, I didn't lose too much there.
No, that's not so bad.
So now this connection, as you said before, is the cold water. Hot.
The one off the top
Yeah.
is the hot.
Okay,
You always draw hot water off the top of the tank. Cold feed's always into the bottom.
okay.
So we'll just undo this joint here, and then we'll undo the joint on the cold inlet, and we'll be able to pull
Okay.
the tank out.
And I can see now that the cold is just right below it on the bottom there.
Yeah, just right down in here.
Okay. So that's typically what the tanks will look like. And then to the right there is the new relief valve.
Yeah, this guy right here.
Yeah. I love how on a boat that everything is super convenient and easy to get to. Oh wait, that's the opposite. I meant to say the opposite of that. And just so everyone knows, that white little hose that's
Yeah.
attached to the connection that you're disconnecting it from, it just goes around into the engine bilge area, and it's open on the other end. So that's how the water drained, and it's just there for directing the water over to that area.
Yeah.
I found that out one day when I opened it, and then water came gushing out. So the last thing to do is unscrew the little mounting brackets, at least the ones that are still holding it down there.
Yeah, I don't feel like they're holding much anymore.
No. And I can grab onto this to carry it. I'm going to be able to get it. Good question.
Maybe we've got to take a couple more things off here.
So we tried to get the tank out and then discovered we have to take the fittings off now to get it through this opening. And fingers are crossed that the new tank will fit down the opening. Now that we've run across this issue.
Well, after realizing how snug the fit is to get that old tank out of the lazarette, I was getting a little more concerned about the new tank fitting down the lazarette. And I knew it was slightly larger, but not by much. What my main concern was is that there's a flange at the bottom that goes around the entire base of the new tank. And it's made of like a hard plastic, so it was something I was looking at that I could modify if I had to. I guess you could say on some projects there's a point of no return, and by that I mean you can't return the item that you're modifying to make it fit into the space you need it to. And I had the idea of trimming the flange at the bottom of the tank, just on each side of the tank, so it would go down into the lazarette. We were working with a very small margin of error for space here, and I was pretty sure it was going to work, so I was feeling okay about making the modification, because the only other way to get that tank into the lazarette, if I couldn't get it through the top, was to remove my engine, and then it would be no problem, but I was not about to consider that at this point. So let me just show you what I had in mind.
trim this little plastic flange. Not here where these come out to where the flange is anyways, or here, but on the sides to give us a little more clearance. So we'd still have the mount, but if I could just trim this here, that'll give us a little more clearance. And on the other side, if we do the same, it gives us more clearance. So that may be enough just to get it through the opening. So that gives us a little more clearance. Now I'll do the same to the other side.
Now for the moment of truth, will it fit down the opening?
It does weigh a few pounds. No, we're still having a clearance issue.
So now the idea is to remove that piece of teak trim at the top of the lazarette, because that would allow me to tilt the tank a little to get it down into the opening, and that may give us enough space. We're off by such a small amount that I knew at this point, I was pretty confident that the tank will go in. It was just going to be a little bit more work to get that opening prepped for it.
Well, John started pulling off this teak piece of trim, and that's going to give us a little bit better clearance, but we're about a 1/2 inch shy where the tank is the widest. So maybe if we take that off, it'll be better. So it's pretty typical. You do a job and it turns into more.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Throw that on the dock. Mark.
Well, you guessed it, the tank still wouldn't go in, and I just needed a tiny little bit more clearance, and I thought I'll just do a little bit of a cut on the back edge of that locker into the mold of the lazarette opening, which would later be covered by that piece of teak anyways, and that may give us just enough clearance to get the tank in.
Ready?
I'm ready.
This is it.
It's gonna work.
It has to work, because we don't have much more to trim off. We could do a little on this side, but
It was so close.
yeah, so let me get this thing clipped in first. Okay, clear here. Awesome, the tank is in.
Well, that was a big relief. Like I mentioned before, there was that point of no return where I made those cuts to the flange on the tank, and I was pretty confident the whole time that we would get it in there. I just didn't realize I was going to have to remove the wood trim and make a small cut in the opening of the lazarette. But sometimes you have to modify your plan and make it work. Now it's on to the reinstallation of all the fittings, which I was going to just reuse a lot of the same fittings because they were in fine condition, and put everything back together. So when you wrap that Teflon tape,
Yep.
is there a direction to wrap it that's
There is
better?
a direction.
So why don't you tell everyone
You want to keep it in
that
the
might not know?
direction of the threads. If you put this on backwards, when you thread it in, all that tape's just going to back off again. So you spin it in the direction that the fitting's going to be turned.
So it'll keep the stretch and the tension on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many wraps are you putting on?
I go 4 or 5.
Okay.
4 or 5 turns. And we'll use this is just a liquid Teflon thread sealant.
Okay.
So we'll use that as well.
I'll just take a look at that. And you can just buy this at any home hardware place?
Yeah, you can get it at hardware stores. I mean, there's different brands.
Oh, okay.
Names. It's just a white Teflon dope.
Okay. And with the cap there, I'm guessing there's a brush on it or something?
Yeah, there's a brush in the can.
Okay, so it's attached to that cap?
Yep.
You pull it out, brush it on.
Yep.
And you do that right over the Teflon tape?
Right over the Teflon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I guess that's what you're doing next. Oh, so it's pretty pasty.
Yeah. Just put a little bit of it on here. You got a spare hand?
I do. Now those were our 2 fittings for the heat exchanger portion
Yeah.
of the tank, right?
Correct. So you
That's
should
right
thread
over
it
there.
Right in here.
So are you doing that right till it won't go anymore?
No,
No?
no. Go a little bit less. I mean, we're spinning in brass fittings. Brass is, it's a soft metal, right? Nice and snug.
So just before you got here, I mentioned to everyone that you've got the boat right next to me.
Yeah.
And it's Beneteau 38.
Yeah, it's the first series. It's the 38S5.
Okay. And
It's
what?
1992.
Oh, nice. And how long have you had it?
Bought the boat back in December.
Okay.
So, relatively new to me.
And are you living aboard?
I am.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought you came down
Oh,
a lot here. Okay. So that's why I see you here all the time. So I thought it might be cool. We'll see what the comments say, but maybe we could get a tour of the boat sometime.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I
Definitely.
think that would be something we could do for
Yeah.
everyone. And okay, so you guys, if you want to see John's boat, comment below, and we'll get a tour of his Beneteau 38 first series. So basically now you're just doing the opposite of what you did to take it all apart.
Yeah.
Just reassembling all the pieces back on.
One of the really great things about having a qualified person help me with a project like this is not just to learn how to properly put all the fittings in and see how the whole tank is installed, but also a few tips on ongoing maintenance of the tank.
This is the sacrificial anode.
Oh, okay.
So, typically, like you'll read it on the tank, they'll say annually check the anode. So this used to have a little rod on it.
Oh.
So this is gonna corrode, and it's gonna prevent the corrosion of the tank.
Oh.
So every few years you could pull one of these out and you inspect this rod. As you see it wearing away,
Yeah.
you can get a replacement one and put it on. Once this is corroded through,
Yeah.
your tank will start rusting out.
So the anode is on the
Anode's on the hot.
cold. Oh, the anode's on the hot.
Anode's on the hot. So that's on
Okay.
the outside one. The
top
upper
Okay.
tap on the tank.
So, and I should check that every year?
It says every year.
Yeah.
It's going to be years before you start to see any real
Okay. Issue?
breakdown of that rod.
Okay. So maybe in 3 years or something, or...
Yeah. And as time goes on, you would check it more frequently.
Okay.
Right?
And then it's just a matter of buying a new one and replacing it.
Yep.
And that wouldn't be something specific for this tank. I could probably get it that is something more universal, as long as it's that same size.
Yeah, they're pretty universal. I mean, because you just bought this tank now, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I'd just go back to the same place you were at, right?
Yeah, and just buy an extra one.
And buy an extra one, then you're good.
Yeah, all right. Now those fittings, I notice you're not putting any thread, Teflon, or anything.
No.
It's these. So how do these fittings work?
So these fittings, you got a male end.
Yeah.
And your female seat here.
Okay.
So it's just really, as you tighten the nut, it's just going to compress the two faces together.
Enough that it won't leak.
Enough so it won't leak. So by Tefloning these, this isn't the sealing portion.
Oh, I see, yeah.
It's the face of this, which is sealing it.
Yeah.
And don't crank them too...
Yeah, they might break.
Too tight, right? They're just plastic threads.
Yeah.
You're better to leave it a little looser. Turn it on if you get a little drip.
Snug it slightly.
Give it another snug.
Okay. So now that panel's off.
Yep.
Can you explain what's going on in there?
Yep. So this guy here, this is going to be the entrance for our wiring here.
Okay.
Bring the wire in here. We're going to have to fish it down through here. These are actually going to get wired right down here. So this guy here, that's the actual heating element.
Okay.
So one thing a lot of people actually do, when we first started, we turned the power off.
Yep.
Before we drained it. A lot of people forget. They'll start draining it. They forget that they still got the element turned on. So these burn out easy. So I mean, if your hot water tank ever stops heating, what you can do is come here, test for power.
Okay.
Make sure you got power to the element.
Yep.
If you do have power but you're not getting hot water, this actually just spins out of the tank.
Okay.
So you can disconnect the leads, spin out, you can get a new element.
Okay.
And
this is just for the electric part of it.
Correct.
This has nothing to do with the heat exchanger.
Correct. So the connection's made. We're just going to go black to black, white to white, and hook up the ground.
Yep.
Down at the bottom here.
Okay.
And it's pretty...
And the ground also has a preset wire we just crimp into?
Yep, we're just going to crimp right onto it.
Oh, that's handy. If you run out of Teflon tape, I just found this in the package.
Oh.
It's a mini roll.
That's cute.
Mini Teflon. Yeah.
Just in case.
I don't think I'd go to the job site with this, because you might get chased off the job site.
It might happen.
Ah, the old relief valve. Brings back memories.
I feel like we just did this.
Yes. I did mention it on my video that you helped me out with that.
We got lots of hose to reach the
Our
fittings. So
okay.
these are kind of beat up.
Okay.
We'll put a fresh cut on and...
Okay. That sounds good. Just to clarify, the hose that's the hot one, that's coming from the engine, or is coming out of
the engine.
The coolant?
So that's the warmest water.
Okay.
So we're going to put that in the top of the coil. It gives off its heat.
Yeah.
That's the hottest water to the top. It's giving off heat, it's cooling down, so now it cycles down the coil and out.
Well, now we're ready to hook up the coolant line hoses, and because of the tight space and I had to give John a hand with this part of it, I wasn't able to record it, so I'll just explain what we did and why we did it. So when we disconnected the old tank, you may have noticed all that coolant ran out of the coil inside the tank into that tray. And with the new hoses, if we just filled them to the top and hooked them on really quickly, there would be an airlock in my coolant system because there's a whole little length of line that wouldn't have coolant. So that would create an airlock and then the system wouldn't work. So what we did was we topped up the hose for the bottom and we hooked it on, and then on the top fitting we put a small piece of hose with a funnel at the top, and I poured coolant into it so that it would fill up that coil inside the tank down to the connected hose. Then we connected the top hose by topping it up with coolant and then quickly fitting it on. And at that point there still might be a little air in there, but not as much as there would have been if we hadn't filled the whole coil. So what I did was I just ran the engine for a few minutes with the coolant cap off, and what I've heard that does is it will start to warm up, and once it starts to warm, it'll bring any air out of the system out through the cooling cap. So I just kept an eye on it while it was running, just in idle, and or slightly above idle. And as soon as I started to see the coolant come up a little, I told John to turn the engine off. Now that everything's ready to go, it's just a matter of turning the water pressure back on to fill the tank back up. And one thing that's important to do is open the hot water faucet in the sink so that as the tank fills, it'll push the air out of the tank through the faucet. It's time to try the water pressure and see how long this runs to fill the tank. Oh, we're getting water just starting to come out. Okay, so now that the pump has stopped, I'm going to try the hot water again to see if we get normal pressure. Sounds good, looks good. Yeah, sounds about right. Okay, so I've gone out and reconnected the shore power and just turned the main breaker on, and now we're going to turn on the element. So that's how I heat the tank using electricity from shore power. Well, it didn't take long, and I had a tank full of hot water, and that was by heating it with the electric element. So the next step was to turn off the element, drain as much hot water out of the tank as I could, and then run the engine to try heating it with the heat exchanger. And once again, I had a tank full of hot water, and all systems are good, and no leaks. Not like before where I had the leaky relief valve and then the leaky tank. There's no issues with water leaking, and both systems are working for heating the tank. Well, thanks a ton, John. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
And,
Happy to help.
Yeah, and if there's anything I can ever do to help you, just let me know. And
Oh, well, I got a holding tank job
okay.
coming up. So
I've never done a holding tank project.
I saw your video.
Oh, that was a different guy. A few extra modifications to get the tank in, but it worked. So what I had originally done was just measured the base at the bottom. I never really thought about the opening at the top because I just thought, well, the other tank was in there, and this was basically the same dimensions, other than the little extra flange. So one thing I should have looked at before, but we got it in.
Yep.
So, and thanks again. That was awesome.
Lots of fun.
Yeah. Okay, guys. We'll see you on the next video.
I've just realized something. We didn't read the instructions.
You don't read the instructions until you break something.